Hey everyone, in this video I'm just going to go over a little bit about Camouflage, which is getting a huge upgrade, and I've gotten some game film thanks to a beta user by the name of Nimrod, so shout out to Nimrod for all this great film that they were able to pass along to me. Don't forget guys to like and subscribe to my channel for more content and information. So the current definition of camouflage, or what camouflage does right now in the game, is a character under the effect of camouflage becomes invisible to walker enemies and will not be attacked or seen as a target. The only walker enemies that can move towards camouflage toons are ones that have keen senses. So camouflage was basically just a walker ability, but the new update is making a huge change to camouflage where it's actually going to work on people enemies. So the new update in beta shows that a character under the effect of camouflage takes no damage from attacks or abilities when they are not the primary target. So status effects can still be applied, so I'm guessing that's like defense down, stun, taunt, and so on. To go on with the rest of the ability, it still works the same way towards walkers, but the big change is about a primary target. Now, the question was asked on Discord, so what's counted as splash damage for the new camouflage effect? And the answer: splash damage is a more general term for damage done to additional targets and not limited to weapon effects. So we're thinking of the green and red splash weapons. So combining this information with the information from the new definition, there are so many things that can fall underneath splash damage. We're thinking collateral damage to characters, potentially payback characters. We're thinking of anyone who rushes and does damage to multiple characters, because anyone who is not the primary target that you're targeting, they become a secondary character, meaning they won't take damage from splash damage, which is weapons or abilities. So a real simple example is Mercer and Mike have camouflage applied to them, and my team, well, Nimrod's team, sorry, and I'll just be referring to it as my team throughout the video, just for simplicity's sake, but Nick is about to rush, and usually he can rush multiple targets and apply an AP drain to them as well. But in the next slide, we can see that after Nick rushes, Mike takes the maim damage and has AP drained from him. Mercer does not take the maim damage, but he does have AP drained from him. So this is the part about how the abilities can still play into effect, so the AP drain, but he is not taking any damage because he was not the primary target, but Mike was. Now, some more food for thought is that even on a rush that should break a Guardian shield, so in this case, Zoo should be able to break Douglas's shield. Instead, because of a camouflage ability, the shield isn't broken. This just means that it's going to take many more attacks in order to apply actual damage to the target. In some ways, it feels like abilities like Guardian 2 are getting a boost as well, because those shields will be able to last longer because they have to take direct hits if your team is under the influence of camouflage. Like in this case, we take a look, and if there was a Guardian shield here, it would be a lot more difficult to actually apply damage to this defensive team, assuming it was like a full defensive team. But one of the strategies that I'm kind of thinking of is that if there's a Guardian toon on the defensive team, bring in a toon that has reflect damage, because I can still use a toon like Cole to taunt you, because that's indirect damage, it's an ability, it's not splash damage, and maybe that way I could trigger my own reflect damage in order to break those Guardian shields, even if they're under the influence of camouflage. Because I feel like it would be a real waste if I was running Dale on attack and used his rush to break Guardian shields, but because the toons are all under camouflage, instead he breaks no one's shields and doesn't apply the defense down. Since in Dale's case, you have to break the Guardian shield and apply actual damage for that defense down ability to trigger. Currently in the game, I'm kind of just waiting and expecting a camouflage leader to come out, because that way it would provide a lot of protection for any defensive team. I'm expecting a leadership skill like Camo for 2 turns, and HP as well as defense, because as you see in this video, it basically neuters a lot of attack teams. Like Diego is able to apply impair and defense down, but he's not able to apply any damage. When we get into characters like Sean or Alpha, who apply area damage, or we think Arav or Princess, who apply line damage, all of a sudden these toons are a lot less effective at being damage dealers, because they can only apply their damage to a single toon. if the enemy is under the influence of Camouflage. Now, thankfully, there are some ways to remove Camouflage, like I'm expecting some active skill to come out to remove Camouflage, but a toon like Priya, her active skill can remove all positive status effects, so in that case, she can actually remove Camouflage from the enemy. There's other toons in this team in particular that also have a similar ability, but unfortunately do not work against Camouflage. On a lot of toons, the wording is a defense buff, where they can remove all defensive buffs on an enemy toon. But apparently Camouflage is not considered a defensive buff. Now, it would be interesting if they did change that, because it would make a lot of other toons more viable to use. Because right now, like, Priya is a very viable toon for anyone to use, but at the same time, I know a lot of people don't want to increase her active skill because she might use it more often on defense if they run her both ways. Now, I personally have leveled my Priya's active skill, and I find it to be really useful. I've used it before to remove like L's pain split ability, as well as the healing factor. I use it to remove defensive buffs on human shields. There's just so many applications for this active skill, but at the same time it's very limited because it can only remove positive status effects from a line of enemies and not a group of enemies. Now, there are a few other toons that do have this ability as well. Clementine is another toon that can remove all positive status effects from that enemy and all enemies adjacent, so her rush is actually very useful in this case because she can remove it from every single enemy on the opponent's team. The biggest downside is that it's linked to her rush, meaning she has to rush, versus an active skill being an easy trigger and somewhat dependable trigger, because you know by X turn you can use this active skill unless they end up dazed, of course. Axel is another toon that actually has this ability on his active skill, so I don't personally have Axel, but I know some other people do. I'm not sure if you can still really use him very much because he also is an alert toon and he's a 6-star, and right now the meta is heavy blues and a bit of yellow. We don't see a lot of red and green yet, but maybe that'll change in the future. Now, some other ideas that you might have is like using Lily, for example, because 6-star disarming toon. Her rush can remove any positive defensive statuses from all adjacent enemies, so to one enemy and all enemies adjacent, but Camouflage is not considered a defensive status. I'm kind of intrigued that it's considered an offensive status, considering it's a way to be like almost sneaky, like you're hiding your toons. So I personally see it as a defensive status myself, but neither Lily nor this Dwight are able to remove Camouflage from the enemy toons. There are a few other toons that also have this ability, like Joshua is another toon, and Joshua is actually someone that I have, and I would consider running him on defense if I knew he could remove Camouflage, say, from an attacking team, if I were running my Rampage Priya on defense, just as an example. And as always, here's just some film evidence so you guys can kind of see for yourself. So in this case, we're not going to use Priya's active skill, which removes all positive effects, but we're going to end up triggering Mike's ability, which will give Camouflage to the whole team, and then we're going to rush Dwight to see if he can actually remove the Camouflage ability. I'm kind of expecting that once we get a Camouflage leader toon or a Camel toon that can be triggered on the first turn, either by an active skill or even a turn 1 rush, I do expect for us to get more toons that have Priya's active skill ability either on their rush or on their active skill as well, where they can remove positive effects, or at least an ability that just removes Camouflage in general. So as you see, Joshua rushes and he's not able to get rid of any of a Camouflage ability. Dwight also can rush and there's no Camouflage ability that is reduced or taken off. I guess another counter to Camouflage would be running the green weapon that has Ransack on it, where you can actually steal positive effects from the enemy, and I'm guessing that's what they're going to call Camouflage, just a positive effect in general, or if it's considered a positive attacking or offensive threat because it's obviously not a defensive one for some reason. I'm also curious as to why Focus does not seem to help your team. So Focus is an ability that lets you attack around human shields as well as ignore, confuse, and taunt. And it's just curious to me that walkers with keen sense can ignore the ability Camouflage. and focus can't for some reason. Anyway, let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of the upgrade to Camouflage and how it might influence you when you're attacking or defending.